Good morning, everyone. We want to welcome you to our webinar today. We're excited to have Data Masons with us. Dennis Bruce and Sean Martin will be presenting on overcoming the challenges of moving to D365 Business Central in the cloud. And I know you're all eager to get started with this presentation. So before I pass it over to Dennis, I just want to remind you that we are recording this webinar as well as all of our webinars, and it will be posted to our on-demand webinar library for you to review again or share with anyone. And if you do have any questions, please feel free to type those into the questions box, and we will get them answered during our Q&A time at the end of our session. So now I'm going to pass it on over to Dennis to kick off our presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Angie. And I assume you can see my screen, correct?
Yes.
All right, perfect. Well, first of all, thank you very much for attending today. My name is Dennis Bruce, and I am with Data Masons. And as you see from the screen, what we're going to be talking about are real EDI experiences that you can learn from as you start to plan your migration or your trip from your on-prem ERP to D365 Business Central in the cloud. And so today, if I can move my screen, today myself, again, Dennis Bruce, and the other gentleman with me is Sean Martin, who's a business development manager. We'll be handling the hour and going through a couple of things. So you can see on the right-hand side, first of all, we'll talk about some of the things that you need to think about as you plan that ERP/EDI project, right? Those changes that will happen, what you can expect. So we've done this a number of times. And so what we'll do on the second slide is we'll talk about the best practices when you're looking at an EDI project. Now, I'll tell you that these best practices work overall, not just from an EDI perspective, but overall from an ERP or any other ISV solution as you're looking to move to Business Central in the cloud. At that point, I'll turn it over to Sean, and Sean's going to talk about Data Masons EDI and what our solution is, how it works with Business Central, and go through some functionality pieces that attack some of those things that we talk about in those first two slides, some of the issues that come up and some of the best practices that we have, okay? After that, I'll jump back in and we'll talk about operating models, how you can execute with Data Masons EDI. We'll give you a couple of different approaches that are available to you. We'll talk about cloud, and I'll pull up and discuss a little about cloud architecture, how we run in the cloud, how we interact with your supply chain, and you'll get a kind of a visual of that. And then I'll discuss what a typical customer timeline looks like, and what you can expect as you roll out EDI with ERP or with Business Central. And then we'll wrap it up. And as Angie mentioned, we'll get into the questions. So if you have them, you can have them teed up prior to, and we can jump in and address them accordingly. Okay, so let's talk about moving to the cloud and some of the things that you're going to have to consider as you look at this project. So the first thing we see from an issue perspective is cost of resources, okay? So you have to decide, you've already decided you're going to run in the cloud, right? So now you have choices. You're going to run in public cloud, private cloud. How many environments do you need? We all know that you're going to need production, but then do you need tests? Do you need dev? Do you need multiple devs? What's the footprint from a technical perspective? What do those technical specs need to look like for test and dev? Do they need to be turned on all the time? So all these things that you have to decide upon. So it's not just saying, hey, I'm going to run in the cloud. That's it. We're done. Getting out of the on-prem business. You've got to just make a decision when you start this project, how many of these environments you're going to have. So, test and dev probably don't need the same footprint or can get away with a smaller technical footprint, but production needs to be robust, right? Because you don't want to run into any problems from a production perspective. And don't forget, short term, you still got to support your current system. And that internal environment is probably going to stick around for a while, right? So it's going to stay till after you go live till you decide what you're going to do with that data. So you have to account for that as well. Second piece, data migration. How much data do you need to come over to the new system? Well, and that is going to depend on the type of company you are, the type of analysis you do. Are you involved in things from a governmental perspective where you're required to keep a certain amount of data? So Sean and I did a session last month where somebody came on, and one of the questions was, can I get 10 years of data and move that over? So the answer to that was yes, you could. But then I asked the question, why would you want 10 years of data? But it was because of a company-wide reason, because dealing with the government, they were required to keep that amount of data. So you have to plan your account for possible, and then you also have to plan for any changes you're going to do to that data. So if you decide to change naming conventions of master data, like, hey, what my item numbers will look like, what my account numbers will look like. That's all master data when it comes to EDI. And if you're changing that naming convention, you're going to have to change that data as well when you move it over. So you need to really have a plan when it comes to data migration, including, depending on how you do EDI now, there's a host of what we refer to as turnaround data. So data that gets included on the outbound documents that you might or might not have in your ERP system, or maybe it's in the EDI system, so you have to plan for that as well, okay? And then, so you need to know where that data is going to be, how much of it you need, and how we're going to access it. Third piece is customizations, okay? So when you go from, so if you run Nav right now, or maybe you have GP or AX or something like that, and you're going to move to D365 in the cloud, those on-prem ERPs were extremely flexible, right? This is the way they were built, it's the way they were sold, it's the way the partners treated them. And those customization and the flexibility allowed for a number of customizations. You could bend that ERP to support your needs at that time. But now you go into a new ERP, one that probably has more functionality, is more robust. So the question is, do you need those customizations that you had before? Are they actually applicable to what your business is? And remember, in a lot of cases, the one thing you don't want to do is you don't want to take customizations that you did, say, 10 years ago, because it made sense 10 years, and move them to your new solution when that new solution doesn't necessarily need those. So you really need to take a look at that. That includes business processes, right? So you probably set up business processes. If you had this ERP for 10 years, you probably set up this business process 10 years ago. But does it still make sense? You need to ask yourself, did you change your process to accommodate your software, right? Is this still the best way to handle this process with this new environment I'm going to have? So you need to look at business processes and customizations in the same way. Enough time in the day. This is one of the biggest things that we find with people is, as they're looking at their projects, they don't take into account the amount of time it's going to take, because everybody's busy. If you talk to them about their jobs that they have, right? So now all of a sudden you're putting on an ERP project, which we understand touches every part of your organization. And then if you layer on top of that an EDI project, which people on this call could be involved in ERP and probably would be involved in EDI as well, but then you also have a day job. So you have to remember that your business demands from an organizational perspective, they're not going to wait. You can't put your business on hold until the ERP and EDI is up and running. If sales is standing at your doorstep saying, hey, this is great, we just signed this big new customer and they need to be live on EDI in the next 6 weeks, you can't sit there and say, sorry, it's going to be 8 months before we go live, or 6 months before we go live, and we'll get to it then. So you don't have a full appreciation of the amount of time it's going to take for all these projects stacked up along with your day-to-day operations, okay? Security, You need to make sure you're accounting from a security perspective, especially for your on-prem solution right now, and including after go live, right? So you want to make sure you're including those plans security-wise. You have to think about ISV solutions working together. One of the big things here is when you change to a new ERP, you typically take a look at your ISV solutions that you're going to need going forward, or maybe ones that you have now and think, hey, do I still need that, or maybe should I go to something else? So I'll give you a great example. We have a customer that was going to D365 from on-prem. They had a winter sports company, and then global. So as we were dealing with them, we had the whole project laid out. Everything was great. We were on the last call before we were to sign off. Just as I was getting off the phone, they started themselves and their resellers started talking about the new WMS system that they were going to implement. So I said, I just stopped the call and said, wait, you're getting a new WMS system? It was never brought up as we were planning out the project. And because they're in the sporting goods world and they deal with retailers, they do a lot of ASNs. They have like 30 plus ASNs. And if you know anything about an ASN, we need that pack level detail, those shipments to be included on the ASNs. It's kind of a foundational thing for it. So they were going to change their WMS system, which we were integrating with now, to a system where I had not heard of, didn't know if we were going to integrate with it, didn't know if they were going to take the WMS data and push it back into D365. All of a sudden, this whole thing just kind of stopped, right? So you got to think and consider about your ISV solutions that you're going to be bringing on and how they're going to be working together, okay? So especially the ones that are key to an EDI project. The last piece, integration, right? So if the solution is not built in D365, you need to look at the integration framework, okay? Because things are different, right? So in the past, you might have had a ISV solution that dealt with nav and used XML ports or had access to the SQL. That all goes away. So you get to D365 Business Central, what are you going to leverage? Well, luckily for them, they have the whole OData framework and APIs, and there's other things now that you can leverage, but you need to make sure that the solutions you're going to work with from an ISV perspective actually take advantage of that. So let's talk about best practices, because on that slide before, these are all the issues that we know that people run into, because we've been doing it for a couple of years now, moving people from on-prem to a cloud-based EDI or along with a cloud-based ERP. So here's some of the best practices. And again, you can use these not just from an EDI perspective, they actually kind of contribute across other ISV projects and with ERP as well, okay? So the first thing is engage early, okay? What we found is you want to engage with your BC partner and your EDI partner, and you want to make sure that there's a tight working relationship between us and the VAR. Sometimes we get into situations where customers believe that if you keep the VARs and the ISV separate, that'll drive down the cost of the project, and that can't be farther from the truth. So you want to make sure that we have a tight working relationship. If EDI is a mission critical application, you want to make sure we're involved in the design phase, okay, and the go live decision, because there are certain things that will happen in the ERP project that will be key for us to then get to our next phase. And if you've just set some arbitrary date for a go live and not included all the things that that we from an EDI perspective need to accomplish in the time frame allowed, then you're going to condense that and rush the project, and it won't be as successful as it could be. So you want to make sure mission critical ISVs are part of that go live, so we can help lay out a clear scope, definition of the project, and when things can happen, and ultimately when a solid go live date would be. We also can identify any EDI focused modifications that you might have made before that we can separate or actually not include, I should say, right? So engage early and make sure that there's an environment where we can set up and have a tight working relationship with the reseller. Second piece is you want to leverage your partners. Okay, we talked before about the amount of time it takes, and also too, but look at the people you have internally, right? So are those people enough from a technical perspective? Do you have enough time also to devote to the project, right? Where you can leverage your D365 BC partner and your EDI partner, like a Data Masons, who brings a ton of expertise when it comes to ERP and EDI, all right? Leverage as much as possible. We had a customer go to D365, tier one automotive supplier. They knew they had a gap internally. So what they did was they leveraged their partner and ourselves to fill that gap, okay? And we were able to bring the expertise and the time to devote to their project, which ultimately made it extremely successful because they didn't have to rely just upon themselves. You want to have an emphasis on your data, right? So you want to take a look at your data migration. Data migration is key to keeping project costs down, especially from an EDI perspective, because it needs to be as relatively clean as possible. If that happens, that reduces the amount of testing cycles and keeps it down that we have to do. We've had companies out there that put a huge emphasis on making sure that their data is as clean as possible. And because of that, the overall project costs were able to come down because we were able to limit the amount of testing and back and forth and rework that we could. You want to embrace the changes, right? So you can, along with that data conversation, you can take a step back and look at that data structure, right? So are you planning for what you need going forward? Again, like we talked on the last slide about the business processes. Do they make sense? Are they based on what we're doing in D365 Business Central? Does it all kind of come together now with the new ERP versus what we did before? Non-Data Masons or on-premise customers moving to the cloud are able to take advantage of, again, eliminating the customizations, including turnaround data, cleaning up their internal processes, and you're able to apply some now advanced business rules processing outside of the ERP that helps put that data in a better position as we go and integrate it, okay? Reduce complexity and cost through operational and execution choices that you have. So you might have relationships from an EDI perspective that have been running for years and you've not touched them because they work, they run, there's no reason to look at it, just let it keep going. However, that trading partner in your supply chain could have changed things in the past that you've never taken advantage of. So for instance, there are multiple communication methods now that will allow you to connect and trade unlimited documents at no cost, right? They could have put that in place or made that an option for you, but you never took advantage of it because, hey, this thing is running, I don't want to mess with it, right? So we've seen this happen before where people don't understand that they can trade directly with the supply chain partner at no cost, but because it's always worked that way, they've never touched it. Now's a chance to step back and look and see how you're connecting. The other piece is something we refer to as managed services. So the ability to outsource your EDI processing from a day-to-day perspective. Do you really want to be doing EDI work internally? Is that a core competency you want to build upon, or is that something like, hey, for the cost of a FTE, I might be able to push that off to somebody else, right? So we have customers that have done that, and they've done it in a couple of different ways. One, they looked at it from the standpoint of, hey, as soon as I go live, as part of this project, I don't have enough experience internally. Why don't I look at that managed service team from Data Masons to help out in the project? And they actually liked it so much that they kept it. Another customer we had in the consumer packaged goods space looked at it from the standpoint of they had one person in their organization that everything about EDI was through them. So they were beholden to that person. So they looked at having a managed service option with us as a way to spread the risk, right? As an insurance policy for them, because if something happened to this one person, then at least they knew that they could leverage the managed service team here at Data Masons to do the day-to-day operations of EDI for them, and they wouldn't get caught. Okay. The other piece is you want to optimize automation. There is no reason to be in an electronic relationship with somebody in your supply chain, but have to process everything manually, right? So we've had current customers who actually have Data Masons on the on-prem side who made a constant and consistent effort to automate as much as possible, right? So they wanted to get full automation for all their processes when they moved up to D365, and they were able to take advantage of it with the application. Supply chain agility. So you now have the ability to step back and say, okay, am I doing everything I can with my supply chain? So for instance, we have somebody in the pet food space right now going to D365. And they were coming from a non-Dynamics on-prem ERP solution over to D365. And their big thing was their ERP only allowed a couple of different integrations from a third-party logistics perspective, public warehouse. So all their fulfillment was done by a 3PL. However, all they could do was a warehouse order, warehouse ship advice. That was it. Going to D365, now they had a full range of warehouse documents that they could do. That added value to their business. That is something they wanted included in phase one. Okay. Now, they had another effort going on to do vendor EDI, but we all agreed that that would be a phase two, right? So that's not something they wanted in the initial scope. However, key to their organization was those additional 3PL transactions that they wanted in phase one. So we were able to move that into phase one scope, craft it around what they were trying to accomplish, and that is something that added a lot of value to their business. And then finally, you want to leverage your business. So leverage the people internally. If you're doing a lot of order to cash transactions with your customers, leverage your customer service people, right? And Data Masons EDI allows you to do that. And Sean's going to be doing a demo here in a minute. And what you're going to see is from a UI perspective, the optimized automation, the alert system that we have, the transaction lifecycle explorer, all these things that we have that you'll see in a minute, give your customer service team the ability to support themselves internally. Because they understand customer issues, because they understand the customer's data, because they understand the customer's processes or your processes with them, they can put themselves in a position to support themselves, which takes IT out of the EDI business and gets them a clearer picture on how these things work and be able to respond to issues that might come up on a day-to-day perspective. So those are the best practices that we see from an overall EDI side as well. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to turn this to Sean. Sean's going to talk about the product, how we support some of those best practices with the functionality that we have in the application. Sean?
All right. Let me go ahead and share my screen.
Yep.
Which screen is coming up, Dennis?
EDI information screen.
Okay. And you can see me moving the mouse?
Yep.
All right, excellent. So as Dennis just mentioned, we're going to cover a few different topics from the standpoint of the overview demonstration. First, we're going to start with Data Masons is a true browser-based solution. So from the standpoint of system requirements, really you just need to be able to access the internet, have a browser that you can launch to run Data Masons. It could be, on any kind of mobile device, really just the ability to pull up the browser. We're also going to talk about management by exception. We're going to cover the Data Masons dashboard, talk about some of the pre-configured KPIs and reporting that's available. Also, as Dennis just mentioned, the whole concept of management by exception. So how are we communicating exceptions, errors to the right people within your organization to make sure that they're, quickly and conveniently solved? We'll go through full configuration of trading partners, documents, cross-reference details, And then also we're going to touch on role-based security as well as some of the auditing capabilities within Data Masons EDI. So you should be able to see the Data Masons EDI dashboard. And as I just mentioned, really this is the landing page that your users are going to see when accessing Data Masons. As mentioned, it is a browser-based solution. So it supports any of the different browsers that you may want to pull up Data Masons with, whether that's Internet Explorer, Chrome, Safari, etc. You can run this on any type of mobile device, whether that be a PC, whether it be an iPhone, an iPad, a tablet, etc. The Data Masons solution will size itself based on the screen that you're launching it from. From the standpoint of the KPIs, really the key performance indicators that anybody who is monitoring the day-to-day operations of EDI, this is really where you're going to be able to come in and you can kind of move this around. You can make it your own experience, kind of reset the size of the different tiles that you're looking at. But when you're actually looking at these tiles, we're going to give you summary level data in terms of this example, documents that are on hold that are outbound. So here you can see in this example, I have 72 invoices that actually require some attention because there's some reason why these documents are not getting sent to the trading partner. So with one click, we can actually drill into the detail of that tile to take you into the data that represents those 76 invoices that are currently on hold waiting to get sent to a trading partner. The other key point that I want to mention here is you'll see when I click on that tile, it's really bringing me into what we refer to as the Document Explorer. And this is really pre-filtered based on the KPI that we just launched into. So you can see that these documents are on hold. They're all invoices, they're all outbound, and they require my attention because there's something that needs to be cleared up. If I want to search all my documents, all I have to do is really click on that filter. It's going to clear it out. And now I'm looking at every document out and every document in. So now we're in the full Document Explorer looking at all the transactions. However, if you do need to, you can filter this down with a multi-criteria filter to quickly and easily be able to find any transaction in Data Masons that you really need to look up. Also, as you clear up some of these different transactions, I can go in, I can edit this transaction, we can add notes, and as Dennis mentioned earlier, we can also look at the Transaction Lifecycle Explorer. So I'm going to cover that here in just a few minutes. After you've done some work, some research, maybe cleared up an error, we can also reset this document back to ready status, which in a few minutes I'm going to cover the Data Mason scheduler. Once it sees that it's in a ready status, it'll automatically reprocess that document. So there's a number of things that you can do right from the Document Explorer, to make sure that your transactions are getting processed, efficiently, and accurately. The other thing that I want to mention, just from the standpoint of some of the areas that we're covering, is that whole concept of really being able to manage, based on exceptions. So when I go into settings, you're going to see these error codes. With Data Masons, what you're able to do is, even though we already have, these error codes pretty much set up out of the box and so forth, what our customers have the ability to do is they can really come in and they can modify these error codes. So they can really tailor the messaging that's getting sent to customer service or to a business user for exactly what they need to do to solve for an error. So when this error actually takes place, an email is going to get triggered and it's going to get sent to the customer service team or wherever it needs to be directed. And not only does it give them the description of what the error is, it tells them what the problem is, but then on top of that, you can really predefine what the solution is for how to solve this. So solve, step 1, step 2, step 3. If unsure, if you can't figure it out, contact Sean in accounts receivable. and then they can assist you in solving this problem. If this error isn't resolved in a timely fashion, you can also escalate. So maybe you sent it to somebody in customer service. The second email 10 minutes later goes to customer service and the supervisor. If they may be away from their desks, you can also automate the sending of a text message to make sure that these documents are getting corrected quickly and efficiently. The other area in terms of data masons, of course, Business Central, D365 really is the system of truth. So, we're continuously syncing to the ERP to make sure that all of your data, is in EDI. So that way we can perform validation, we can incorporate business logic to make sure that when documents are received or when they're going outbound, that it's pulling from the most current data. And that's where within Data Masons, you're going to see here that we're continuously syncing to your item cross-references, your items, your trading partners, customers, vendors, and so forth. So it's very quick, very easy to be able to access that information and so forth. The other point too is just that role-based security that I had mentioned. Within Data Masons, you do have the ability to come in and set up role-based security. So as you define different users within the solution, you also get to define which role applies to that user. So here, this is obviously where you're coming in based on the role is what they can edit, what they can update, what they can delete, what they can view, and so forth. So the role-based security is part of Data Masons, and it's also integrated with Active Directory from the standpoint of passwords and usernames and so forth. The other key too, soon to be released, is going to be role-level based security. This becomes more important from a visibility from a business user or customer service, because if I have access to view one customer, but I shouldn't be looking at another customer, when we release role-level security, that'll give you that additional layer of security to make sure that only the right people are viewing certain, account records and so forth. So from there, the next area that I'm going to go through and talk about is really everything related to automation. And how do we keep people out of Data Masons EDI, and in the ERP where Data Masons based on our automation is really automating every activity within the solution. So we're going to talk about scalable automation, automation of all your EDI documents, configurable workflows, including non-standards EDIs, such as, working with any of the different documents that you may, receive from your trading partners, XML, CSV, ASCII, delimited files, and so forth, and how we can work with those different types of documents, to automate the integration, just like any other standard EDI document. Also, from the standpoint of automation around reports or exception notices, we can automate the sending of the reports to anybody in the organization that needs to see those on a specific cadence, and then, cover that as well. So from there, let's go back into the Data Masons EDI solution, and I want to talk about the scheduler with Data Masons. So when you come into the scheduler, this is really the heart, the engine of Data Mason, and this is where all the automation is taking place based on what we refer to as workflows and tasks. So when you think about it, a task in Data Masons, we're performing a specific activity to automate that process, whereas a workflow is really a combination of a number of tasks to create a workflow. So to give you an example of a workflow and how we're creating that automation with our solution, this is a good example, the advanced ship notice outbound. So when we go into this workflow activity, you can see it's actually made up of 3 tasks: staging advanced ship notice from the ERP, receive the WMS shipment from ERP, and then send, to the trading partner. So really, between the combination of these different tasks, along with you know, the workflows, that's really where all the automation is coming from. Now, we really think of ourselves as ERP people that happen to know EDI extremely well. So what we've done is we've really laid out the business processes where Data Masons, you know, is already, you know, is configured to automate these business processes right out of the box. So you're going to notice we have quote to cash, procure to pay, logistics and transportation, you know, automotive, product management. So when I'm looking at quote to cash, here you can see all of the business processes that we're automating from the standpoint of Data Masons to the ERP and to your trading partners. So here you can see it's pretty quick, pretty easily identifiable in terms of the business processes that are being automated here. And as I mentioned earlier, you know, really just from the standpoint of, you know, the automation of reports or sending email notifications of error messages and so forth to those customer service, you know, reps or to business users, again, using the Data Mason scheduler, every one of those processes will be automated, you know, with our solution. And then lastly, just from an overview standpoint, you know, we want to point out really that seamless experience that you're going to get from the ERP into EDI. So we refer to this as being tightly integrated, but loosely coupled. One of the core tenets of Data Masons is we do not change core code of ERP to support EDI. So what we're essentially doing, following Microsoft's best practices, is we're dropping in contextual hyperlinks in the ERP to bring you into EDI for visibility and so forth right from the ERP. But again, not changing core code within ERP to support that. And this becomes a really, really big deal with our customers, especially moving to the cloud, you know, where you can expect multiple releases of the ERP from an update standpoint. And if you've added customizations in the ERP, that can have a big, you know, impact on your ability to upgrade. So if we can keep any core code changes out of the ERP, we're going to do it. We're going to talk a little bit about leveraging some of the dynamic workspaces in the ERP for visibility into EDI, empowering some of those end users to maybe take some of this on themselves instead of continuously having to involve, you know, IT or a dedicated EDI coordinator, you know, to help with this. And lastly, we're going to cover the Transaction Lifecycle Explorer to give you that that visibility into the different transactions within, you know, EDI. So from here, I'm going to go back over to the ERP, and I'm just going to cover a couple of key points just from the standpoint of, you know, how we're really trying to blur the lines between, you know, Data Masons and D365 to make it more of a seamless experience for your end users. So the first thing that I want to start with is, you know, just looking at a sales order. So after Data Masons has brought in a document from a trading partner where we've communicated with the network, we've brought in the document, we've taken that document and transformed it into our standard, which is XML, applied your validation, your business logic, your rules against that document, everything checks out, and then we've integrated that into D365, you know, to deliver a perfect document, creating a sales order to start with. So when I come down to the bottom here, you can see I have an example here where I've integrated this document right before the meeting. And there's the PO number, Innovia 12820, and we're going to go in and take a look at this order. That was created through the integration utilizing Data Masons. So when we're looking at this, obviously here you can see that it's an open sales order that's been created. It hasn't been released yet. But when I go to the EDI tile, so right here is that hyperlink that we're giving you, so I can go back and actually look at the original purchase order that was received through Data Masons, or I can look at the TLE, the Transaction Lifecycle Explorer. So when I click on that, you're going to notice that we're just popping open a browser that looks, acts, and feels much like D365. So in a second, it's actually going to show me the life cycle of this inbound purchase order that we've transformed it into the sales order. So here you can see it came in from Target. It was a purchase order inbound. Here is the exact date and time that it was received by Data Masons from the trading partner. Here is the time that we actually integrated this document into D365. You can reference the original purchase order. You can see that it integrated successfully because it's complete. And then if I do need to, I can access the raw data of that document with a click of the button. However, most people cannot read a raw EDI file. So we also give you the option of producing an HTML report of that inbound purchase order where now we've made it human readable. So now anybody can come in, they can look at that inbound PO, and it actually tells them what makes up that transaction. So for example, when I go down to this element, BEG03, I can see that it's the purchase order number. There is Innovia 12820, and we give you the value. So now anybody within your organization, right from the ERP, can actually read these raw EDI files that are being received and transformed and integrated with the ERP. Another good example of this, if I get out of the sales orders and we go back to posted invoices. So right from a posted invoice, I can go to the very last one that I posted, pull this up, and again, we're going to give you that EDI tile. And when I pull the TLE this time, what you're going to see is the entire life cycle of this order. And as Dennis had mentioned early in the presentation, how do we take some of this off of IT or the EDI coordinator and put it back on the business users' hands to quickly and easily solve this? So right here, you can see this invoice, there's an issue, right? Because it's in red and there's an exclamation mark. So when I click on that, we're actually going to show the customer service rep exactly what the problem is. Not only that, but what the solution is, right? So following the instructions that are laid out right there, I can go back to this document right from this window. I can hit edit. We can go to the document root. I can go to the method of collection, and I can put in that it needs to be prepaid for the shipment. Hit save, and now right from here, I can now reprocess this document. Again, without really having to go back into Data Masons EDI, we're putting this flexibility back in the customer service or business user's hands so they can quickly and efficiently solve these issues. In just a minute, you're going to see that this moves from a ready status to a complete status. Lastly, just from the ERP, again, some additional visibility that we want to try to give you. So going here, I want to go to customers and I want to go to the customer account card. So I'm going to go to the customer that we've been looking at, Target, and I'm going to open up the account card. And more than that, we're going to give you much more visibility from the customer account card. Now, again, these are only examples. We can really tailor this depending on the visibility and where you want it within ERP. But right from here, I can go and look at the trading partner. I can look at the item cross-references. Everything is a click away to, again, we're just popping open a browser to quickly and easily show you those item cross-references right from the ERP. So again, it's all about visibility, it's all about ease of use, and really blurring the lines between EDI and your ERP. So with that, I am going to turn it now back over to Dennis, where we're going to step you through a few last key points for the presentation.
Okay, screen, okay, we should be able to see that, right, Sean?
Yes.
All right, perfect. So let's talk, we talk a lot about cloud. Kind of want to give you a picture of what cloud looks like in the Data Masons world. So this is what we refer to as our slide when we talk about DM Cloud. And two concepts we really want you to focus in on is tightly integrated, loosely coupled. Okay, and I'll explain that as we go through. So if you look here in the bottom middle, this is the DM Cloud. So we run a fully based EDI solution in a cloud environment. It runs in Azure. You can run it in a multi or single tenant, completely up to you. and we deliver everything that you need when doing business document integration with your supply chain. Everything is built into the cloud, okay, including industry experts, which is ourselves, and we have teams of people internally from a delivery perspective at Data Masons who deal with EDI in specific industries. So if you've ever dealt with consumer packaged goods, some of the requirements from a apparel footwear perspective are different when you're talking about food. All right, so food manufacturers, distributors, growers, right? There could be different EDI requirements there. And then those two are completely different when you're dealing with somebody in the tier 1 to tier 3 supply chain when it comes to automotive OEMs or industrial equipment manufacturers. So we have teams of people internally involved. So that's all part of the overall DM EDI solution or Data Masons EDI solution running in the DM cloud. If you look to the top right, getting access is all based on security to DM, the DM cloud or DM EDI, and ultimately you'll get through with the browser, right? So you'll access the application through the browser, and it comes with security touch points along the way, whether it's Active Directory, Azure Active Directory. We have multi-factor authentication, so fully full security built around that. So when we talk about the tightly integrated, loosely coupled component, DM EDI runs completely outside of D365 Business Central. So we're completely separate from it. We're not inside. We haven't built all sorts of modifications into the ERP system. And what that does, it gives you a lot of flexibility on how you can respond to your trading partner, your supply chain partner's requirements. So instead of you worrying about, oh my God, how's that going to affect my ERP and the modifications I've made, because we're outside, we can deal with all the nuances when it comes to dealing with your supply chain, and then put the data in a position where it can be integrated into, at a broad and deep level, into Business Central. So that gets to the tightly integrated component. Our integrations off of the OData framework and APIs and REST web services that we use to integrate, and not anymore where we used to use XML ports, or if you're on AX, would be the AIF, or even GP, which leveraged eConnect. So that's what it looks like from that standpoint. But if you look at the top left, your supply chain sits out there, and your supply chain could want to connect with you through different communication methods. They could want to use different formats for their documents. So maybe not everybody's doing EDI. Maybe other people are doing XML. Maybe somebody's doing CXML. You might want to connect, if you look at the top of the circle where it says e-commerce sites, you might want to take advantage of listing products out there on marketplaces. And those marketplaces like Amazon Seller Central, Shopify, Rakuten. One of those marketplaces out there might want you to connect with them, or might require that you connect with them through an API, right? So you're not going to be sending data through EDI. You're going to now be doing an API connection. Those API connections are also supported with Data Masons EDI. So again, we can connect you with your supply chain to whatever partner you have, whatever data format they need, whatever communication method they want. It all gets controlled by DM EDI. So the data goes back and forth to them in the formats they want, through the communication method they require. We process that data, get it into position where we can integrate it directly into Business Central, and then you can connect through DM EDI through whatever method that, through the browser in a secure method. So again, we're tightly integrated, but we're loosely coupled. Now, I talked before that you had multiple models that you could run. So here, if you look on the left-hand side, you'll see EDI activity. So in the normal day-to-day operations, you'll have, your trading partner maps, your day-to-day EDI operations, I should say, compliance with your trading partners, managing transactions, your ERP operations. Those would be standard no matter what method that you choose. Now, it's up to you to decide how you want to run. Most of our customer base runs in the middle, in the hybrid approach, where we deliver the maps to them. So everything your trading partner wants from a mapping perspective, we deliver to spec integrated to the ERP. You run the day-to-day EDI operation. So you have somebody internally that's responsible for EDI. When compliance issues come up or there's changes to the trading partner maps, that's something that Data Masons does. Again, we're in that hybrid approach in the middle. And then finally, managing your transactions and your ERP operations, anything that's happened in the ERP, like adding items or cross-references or setting up trading partners and getting matching data. That happens in the ERP. So that is something that you as a customer would take care of. However, you have options. So if you look to the left, it can be fully managed by yourself. Okay, so where you could leverage and license our mapping tool and do all the mapping yourself. And again, continue to do your EDI operations, but because you have the mapping tool, now you handle your own compliance. So you can actually do your changes yourselves and roll them out. You manage your transactions, manage your ERP operations. On the side to the right, it can be fully managed by Data Masons. Now we're taking the responsibility on for everything except your ERP operations. So you don't want your EDI company in your ERP making changes, adding things, taking stuff away. That's something that you really should be focused on. However, we can take care of everything else that you see on this list. So from a strategic value, it can go from left to right. So we can add as much strategic value to your organization as you choose. It's not a one-fit approach with us. You have multiple ways that you can roll this out, and it's all available to you. Just quickly from a timeline perspective, this is what you would normally see from a timeline. As you can see here, there's a couple of big milestones here, or actually I should say one big milestone, and that's ERP code freeze. So any changes to your ERP is going to happen, and that's when we really start the crux of the project. The testing and the training and things like that will happen for an extended period of time. That's the big phase right there. So here, prior to, we're delivering the project plan, setting up the team, we're analyzing what your requirements are, getting the install done, configuring the software, getting ourselves ready to test. But once we get through that code freeze, and a lot of it has to do from a modification perspective, because we want to make sure that the foundation of your ERP and what we're going to build upon is solid. It's not going to change. Because again, back to what we talked about in some of the earlier parts of this presentation, when your data starts changing, things start changing in the ERP, that causes us to do rework, retesting. We don't want to do that. We want to make sure that as soon as we're ready we start testing actually when your system's pretty solid. So this is what you can expect. Again, this timeline can change depending on the ERP availability and also the size of your EDI footprint, right? How big of an EDI footprint you actually have. All right, just to wrap it up, a couple of key points here. Make sure you plan your migration, right? You want to plan it from a timing perspective, from a data perspective, from who you're going to work with. So you want to make sure that the transition has the lowest amount of risk and you have predictable costs to it. You want to choose that right operating model, right? Leverage the skill sets that you have internally, leverage the skill sets of the people that you're hired to work with you, your ERP and your EDI companies that you're going to be moving forward with, right? Leverage their skill sets as much as possible. And of course, taking advantage of the low cost of the cloud, right? Taking a look at your communication methods, the number of environments you have, what the technical specs need to look like, everything. So you can get yourself from an on-prem into a cloud-based solution going forward. And that is what we have today. So Angie, if there are questions, then we are ready for them.
Okay, thank you. We do have a few questions that came through. How is your solution licensed? Are there transaction fees with Data Masons?
So from a licensing perspective, there are actually, well, the second part of the question is, are there transaction fees? The answer to that is no, there are not transaction fees. We can leverage whatever communication method a trading partner gives you the option to do. So if they tell you you have to do AS2, or they tell you you have to do SFTP, or they tell you have to do VAN, we can put that in place for you. You're not required to use our VAN network. You could use, we support all the major VANs used in the world today. So we can leverage whatever VAN system that you have or you want to use. Otherwise, we would recommend that you take advantage of the least costly option to move data to your customers. So the beginning part of the question was, how do we license it? It's really based on the number of trading partners you have and the corresponding documents that you do with each of them. So our licensing is built around your technical footprint as opposed to the number of transactions or a per transaction cost.
Okay, thank you. This next one is a little long. We need a robust alert system as we have a lot of problems because problems with our current system are missed. Can messages be customized and sent to multiple people in our organization?
Okay, yes. So the answer to that question is yes, they can. So as Sean touched on, we have a full, robust alert system. And it's part of the whole management by exception framework that we've created. And it also plays in with the automation side. So first of all, from a messaging perspective, they can be customized to lay out specifics for your organization. Those messages can be triggered at any time in the process, okay? And on top of that, because of the workflow scheduler that we have that Sean showed, not only do we set up the processes that have to happen when you're from an EDI perspective, but also too, we can trigger audit reports and messaging, alert messaging to anything that happens improperly or properly, depending on whenever you want to see it. So that way, if something goes wrong, not only can we deliver the message to the people that need to act on it, we can deliver it to multiple people. So if that one person's not there, it can go to a group of people, and it can be very detailed to let them know exactly what the issue is and exactly how to clean it up. On top of that, our audit reports that can be delivered after the specific processes can run as well, so people can check on things. So a simple one is the 997 report. So all of a sudden invoices go out. If you don't see a 997, which is a functional acknowledgement letting you know that they received your file, if you don't see that within a 2 to 6 hour time frame, then you know that your customer never got your invoice. So instead of you waiting 30, 45, 60 days and you're not getting paid, a accounts receivable manager can find out the next day that, hey, they never received our invoice. So those types of audit reports can be delivered to anybody in the organization. So we make sure we get over some of the errors before they actually become errors. But if they are errors, you've got a detailed error message telling you what it is and how to fix it.
Thank you. And we do have another one. Can we start out licensing maps from Data Masons and then go our own mapping in the future?
Yes, you can actually. So you can start off from a licensing perspective, getting all the maps. We'll deliver them, as I mentioned in that slide a little while ago, to spec and then integrate them into the ERP, into Business Central. And then later on, as you've gone through your ERP project, as you've gone through your EDI project, there are people out there that have internal resources that can do mapping and sit there and say, well, we really want to grow our footprint. We want to do a lot more maps. We think it's in our best interest cost-wise to get the mapping tool and do it yourselves. You can then take over mapping. You can license the mapping to build all the maps you want. You can take over support for the current maps that you have and handle compliance with that as well. So yes, you can get the best of both worlds. Start off with mapping and then later on, or start off with maps, and then later on, do your own mapping.
Okay, thank you. And is the managed services team just part of consulting, or your support groups?
No, actually, managed services is a separate team here at Data Masons, and it is different from support and different from consulting. And the nice thing about the managed services team is if you sign up for managed services, not only are you getting a resource that is different from consulting and support, but it is somebody that is experienced with EDI, experienced with Data Masons EDI, and experienced with your ERP. So it's a team that is, and it also has backups. So if that person is not available, then there's a backup to that person. So there's never anybody, quote unquote, away or on vacation or sick today, or so you always have somebody that's monitoring your transactions. And they understand the ERP and they understand the EDI. And they're not going to get pulled off your account because they're working on another project or they're doing support for somebody else. It is a separate team from consulting and our support teams.
Okay, thank you. And the last question that came through is, do you provide support in other time zones outside of North America?
Yes, so we are a global organization. We have 160 people all over the world with operations in Europe, Asia Pacific, and North America, and our support teams are spread out throughout the world. So we provide support for all our customers in the Asia Pacific region, customers in the European time zones, and of course, all the time zones across North America. So yes, we do. We have support that goes across, basically follows the sun.
Okay, great. Well, I believe those are all the questions that we have for you today. If anyone has any additional questions for the Data Masons team, please feel free to reach out to them, or you can contact your account manager here at Innovia Consulting for additional questions, and we can get those addressed. And I just want to thank you, Sean and Dennis, for presenting today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
And to everyone on our webinar today, or if you're watching on demand, we thank you for taking some time out to join us. And I wanted to make you aware of our new training workshops that we have going on. We have a variety of training workshops to choose from. So visit our workshop page, and that's innovia.com/workshops for more information and to register for the workshop that fits you best. And we do have more webinars coming up. Tomorrow, December 9th, we have Mary Malone from Innovia Consulting, and she's going to be presenting on After the Oops, Service Recovery Saves the Day. And on Thursday, December 10th, we have Kevin Naughton from Innovia Consulting, and he's going to be presenting on Intro to Power BI, Transform Data into Insights. So check out our website for more of our upcoming events, and that's innovia.com/events. And Innovia has a podcast, if you have not heard of it already. It's called the Innovia Conversation, and we just want to encourage you to listen to our selection that our hosts, Steve Waltz and Jeff Pergolski, have provided to us. And you can find out about all the different podcast platforms to listen to on our podcast page, and that's innovia.com/podcast. So check out the selection and subscribe so you'll be notified when those new episodes air. All right, well, we thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you on another Innovia webinar. Take care, everyone, and we will see you next time.